Sir Roy, one attempt lang. Oh yeah, sorry, one attempt lang because it's just a quiz. You can make a new attempt. It's a small proportion, so pwede mo bawi sa next week. Okay, we need to move on. We're allowed to catch up. So clusters and the new continent by Michael Porter. So now that companies can source capital, goods, information, and technology from around the world, often with a click of a mouse, much of the conventional wisdom about how companies and nations compete needs to be overhauled. So in theory, more open global markets and faster transportation and communication should diminish the role of location in competition. So that sort of spatial quality of business. After all, anything that can be efficiently sourced from a distance through global markets and corporate networks is available to any company and therefore is essentially nullified as a source of competitive advantage. So that's the argument there. Because now we can is it really true? Sorry, my voice. Is it really true that location will play a lesser factor in in economic activities or in business? So let's go through here. There's just a short introduction, which I think will be good for all of us here, because I think it really hits it's a really clear explanation of why we're doing this class. So if location matters less, why then is it true that the odds of finding a world-class mutual fund company in Boston are much higher than most any other place? So for the example here is a mutual fund company, and then it's more often found in Boston. So why could the same be said of textile-related companies in North Carolina and South Carolina, North and South Carolina, high performance auto companies in southern Germany, or fashion shoe companies in northern Italy? So the idea here is that technology is playing a factor, but we still see this clustering of specialized products in specific places around the world. Today's economic map of the world is dominated by what the author calls, this is Porter, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, clusters. So critical masses in one place of unusual competitive success in specific fields. So clusters, I'll just zoom in a bit more, are a striking feature of virtually every national, regional, state, and even metropolitan economy, especially in more economically advanced nations. So think of Silicon Valley, Hollywood, maybe these are the world's best known clusters. So Silicon Valley is known for creating computer products like your machines, your iPads, iPhones. Hollywood is known as a movie making cluster. So clusters are not unique, however, they are highly typical, and therein lies a paradox. So what is the paradox? The enduring competitive advantages in a global economy lie increasingly in local things, knowledge, relationships, motivation, that distant rivals can't match. So here, the competitive advantage of any given place is is based on the local knowledge, local relationships, and local motivations. So though location remains fundamental to competition, its role today differs vastly from a generation ago. So in an era where competition was driven heavily by input costs, locations with some important endowment, a natural harbor, for example, or a supply of cheap labor, often enjoyed a comparative advantage. So this is our next topic after this. What is comparative advantage? So competition in today's economy is far more dynamic. Companies can mitigate many input cost disadvantages through local sourcing, rendering the old notion of comparative advantages less relevant. Sorry, yeah, Where's the other part here? Less relevant and period. Instead, competitive advantage rests on making more productive use of inputs, which requires continual innovation. So untangling the paradox of location in a global economy reveals a number of key insights about how companies continually create competitive advantage. What happens inside companies is important, but clusters reveal that the immediate business environment outside companies also plays a vital role as well. So we're looking at inside companies, well, how is it structured, and the outside of the company, the physical locational factors. So the role of locations has been long overlooked, despite striking evidence that innovation and competitive success in so many fields are geographically concentrated. So there's a direct link with economic success and the location of that economic activity. So whether it's entertainment in Hollywood, finance on Wall Street, or consumer electronics in Japan, clusters affect competitiveness within countries as well as across national borders. Therefore, they lead to new agendas for all business executives, not just those who compete globally. More broadly, clusters represent a new way of thinking about location, challenging much of the conventional wisdom about how companies should be configured. So, how institutions such as universities can contribute to competitive success, and how governments can promote economic development and prosperity. So, even though we have like all this new technology that connects us to different resources around the world, we still can't overlook the impact of what's available locally. And then there is uh, even today, there is still a very strong need for companies or incentive for companies to cluster. And what kind of clustering occurs is dependent on what are the local resources. But how do we define a cluster? So clusters are geographic concentrations of interconnected companies and institutions in a particular field. So this will be important for our exam. So there are geographic concentrations, interconnected, and then in a particular field. So clusters encompass an array of linked industries and other entities important to competition. They include, for example, suppliers of specialized inputs such as components, machinery, and services, and providers of specialized infrastructure. So clusters often extend downstream to channels and customers, and laterally to manufacturers of complementary products and to companies in industries related by skills, technologies, or common inputs. Finally, many clusters include governmental or other institutions such as universities, which is important for us because some of us are in the university. Standard setting agencies, think tanks, vocational training providers, and trade associations. All of these provide specialized training, education, information, research, and technical support. So I'll just skip here to the next part. So they have an example of a California wine cluster in California. So we have this diagram over here. We have grape stock, fertilizers. These are the resources on the left, and they form they are the resources for the California agriculture cluster. On the right, we have winemaking equipment, barrels, bottles, caps, etc. And these go into the wineries and processing facilities, which is connected to growers and vineyards. And then all of this is sort of grounded on education, research, and trade organizations. And then sort of inputting their own sort of resources to wineries and processing facilities. You have the tourism cluster, and then the food and restaurant cluster. At the top, we have state government agencies sort of managing growers and the wineries themselves. So I'll just skip to the summary here. Let's see. Where's the summary? Sorry, it's here on the top. So for example, the California wine cluster is a good example. It includes 680 commercial wineries, as well as several thousand independent wine grape growers. So that was the image down there. An extensive complement of industries supporting both winemaking and grape growing exists. And then the ending here is that a host of local institutions is involved with the wine, such as world-renowned uh, viticulture and enology program at the University of California, the Wine Institute, the and special committees of the California Senate and Assembly. The cluster also enjoys weaker linkages to other California clusters in agriculture, food and restaurants, and wine country tourism. So these examples here is another sort of cluster. This is Italian leather fashion cluster. You can refer to this in your reference. So I'll just go over to the next point. So why are clusters critical to competition? So that creating economic activity. So modern competition depends on productivity, not on access to inputs or the scale of individual prices. So this is more on the economic side. So productivity rests on how companies compete, not on the particular fields they compete in. So companies can be highly productive in any industry, shoes, agriculture, or semiconductors, if they employ sophisticated methods, use advanced technology, and offer unique products and services. All industries can employ advanced technology, and then all industries can be knowledge intensive. The sophistication with which companies in a particular location, however, is strongly influenced by the quality of the local business environment. So companies cannot employ advanced logistical techniques, for example, without a high quality transportation infrastructure. So this is a physical um, resource that is specific to a location. So if a location had less transportation infrastructure, it would have an impact on whatever business or company would exist in that area. And another example here is companies can't effectively compete on a sophisticated service without well-educated employees. Businesses cannot operate efficiently under onerous regulatory red tape or under a court system that fails to resolve disputes quickly and fairly. Some aspects of the business environment, such as the legal system, corporate tax rates, affect all industries. So in advanced economies, however, the more decisive aspects of the business environment are often cluster specific. So these constitute some of the most important microeconomic foundations for competition. So just take note of those different factors. We're looking at transportation infrastructure, quality of the employees, quality of the legal system. They all impact what kinds of how the clusters compete. So clusters affect competition in three broad ways. So first, by increasing the productivity of companies based in the area. So we're talking about productivity again. Second, by driving the direction and pace of innovation. Second factor is innovation. And then third, by stimulating the formation of new businesses, which expands and strengthens the cluster itself. So a cluster allows each member to benefit as if it had greater scale or as if it had joined with others formally without requiring it to sacrifice its flexibility. So we have productivity, innovation, and what was the last one? Um, Stimulating formation of new businesses, or I'll just put here formation of new businesses. So I'll just save this as notes. So clusters and productivity. Being part of a cluster allows companies to operate more productively in sourcing inputs, accessing information, technology, and needed institutions, coordinating with related companies, and measuring and motivating improvement. So this phenomena of like clusters coming together also creates economies of scale because you have more employees, you have more demand, so you can produce more of that same product, which also reduces the cost of production. So clustering allows companies to have better access to employees and suppliers. I'll just summarize a bit. Let's see, access to specialized information and also access to complementaries. So let me just quickly go over the three. I think there should be all three. Yeah. So better access to employees and suppliers means companies in vibrant clusters can tap into an existing pool of specialized, experienced employees, thereby lowering their search and transaction costs in recruiting. Because a cluster signals opportunity and reduces the risk of relocation for employees, it can also be easier to attract talented people from other locations, a decisive advantage in some industries. So if you think of maybe I guess, architectural office, there wouldn't be a lot of architecture graduates in an area without a university that teaches architecture. So it naturally architecture offices locate where there are where people are trained to become architects. So like Cebu City, Manila, the NCR region, basically regions and cities with uh, like high enough level universities that offer that particular course. So a well-developed cluster also provides efficient means of obtaining other important inputs, such as sourcing locally instead from distant suppliers, lowers transaction costs. So whatever supply is in that area, they can also use that to their advantage. So if they source locally, it minimizes the need for inventory, eliminates importing costs and delays, and because the local reputation is important, lowers the risk that suppliers were overpriced or um, I don't know what this word is, renege. Or I think the context that it avoids commitment. So if there's already a business cluster, industry cluster, usually the suppliers are also very much incentivized to work with those clusters. Formal alliances with distant suppliers can mitigate some disadvantages of distant outsourcing, but all formal alliances involve their own complex bargaining and governance problems and can inhibit a company's flexibility. The close informal relationships possible among companies in a cluster are often a superior arrangement. So in many cases, clusters are also a better alternative to vertical integration. Compared with in-house units, outside specialists, just zooming in, are often more cost-effective and responsive, not only in component production, but also in services such as training. So although extensive vertical integration may have been the norm, a fast-changing environment can render vertical integration inefficient, ineffective, and inflexible. So what do they mean by vertical integration? It's when the company grows within itself, so that's why it's vertical. So for example, they train their own employees, the trainers get promoted to a higher position, and then they hire a new trainer, and then they will hire more employees. So it goes vertically. Going horizontally means outsourcing. So apparently it's less risk and more efficient. So even when some inputs are best sourced from a distance, clusters offer advantages. Suppliers trying to penetrate a large concentrated market will price more aggressively, knowing that as they do so, they can realize efficiencies in marketing and in service. So if you're in a cluster, if a business cluster forms, it's more advantageous for a new business to join that cluster because all of the resources are physically there, like closer geographically in that specific cluster. And next, when businesses cluster, they have access to specialized information. So extensive market, technical, and competitive information accumulates within a cluster and members have preferred access to it. In addition, personal relationships and community ties foster trust and facilitate the flow of information. These conditions make information more transferable. So I think we can all experience this, like in our offices or in our practice, that the people we practice with, we create our own sort of cluster. We have our own information, and the closer we are, the more transparent or easier it is to make information. I said transparent, I mean transferable. It's easier to transfer information within a closer, within groups of closer proximities. And then finally, complementary. So a host of linkages, or I guess we can say networking among cluster members, result in a whole greater than the sum of its parts. So in a typical tourism cluster, for example, the quality of a visitor's experience depends on not only the appeal of the primary attraction, but also the quality and efficiency of complementary businesses such as hotels, restaurants, shopping outlets, and transportation facilities. For example, if you go abroad, you look for you go to a destination, the going or the act of going to that destination is not the only factor that you would consider. You would think about your hotels, your restaurants, your shopping outlets, and your transportation facilities. Complementaries come in many forms, and the most obvious is when products complement one another in meeting customers' needs, as the tourism example illustrates. Another form of coordination of activities across companies to optimize their collective productivity. In wood products, another example, the efficiency of sawmills depends on a reliable supply of high quality timber and the ability to put all the timber to use in furniture. So we're thinking about pallets and boxes for low quality timber products. High quality products include furniture or wood chips, the lowest quality, like just like scraps of wood. In the early 1990s, Portuguese sawmills suffered from timber quality because local landowners did not invest in timber management. Hence, most timber was processed for use in pallets and boxes, a lower value use than the uh, limited the price paid to landowners. Substantial improvement in productivity was possible, but only if several parts of the cluster changed simultaneously. So this is a map of the US clusters. So we have Seattle as the aircraft equipment and design, boat and shipping building, and metal fabrication. In Oregon here, we have electrical measuring equipment. Boise has sawmills. Las Vegas has amusement and casinos. Phoenix has helicopters, semiconductors, electronic testing labs, etc., etc. So all different locations have like a specific cluster, and the clusters that form are based on the local resources. Next, let's see, clusters and innovation. So in addition to enhancing productivity, clusters play a role in innovation. So some of the same characteristics that enhance current productivity can have an even more dramatic effect on innovation and productivity growth. Because sophisticated buyers are often part of a cluster, companies inside clusters usually have a better window on the market than isolated competitors do. So computer companies based in Silicon Valley, for example, and Austin and Texas, plug into customer needs and trends with a speed difficult to match by companies elsewhere. So because they're physically there, they have a sort of a quicker response time to the needs of their market, because they can just talk and then okay, you need this, okay, we'll make that. Then the ongoing relationships with other entities within the cluster also helps companies to learn early about evolving technology, components, and machinery availability, service, and marketing concepts, and so on. Such learning is facilitated by ease of making site visits and frequent face-to-face contact. So clusters do more than make opportunities for innovation more visible. They also provide capacity and flexibility to act rapidly. So a company within a cluster often can source what it needs to implement innovations more quickly. Local suppliers and partners can and do get closely involved in the innovation process, thus ensuring a better match with customers' requirements. So companies within a cluster can experiment at lower costs and can delay large commitments until they're more assured that a given innovation will pan out. In contrast, companies outside of that cluster, relying on distant suppliers, face greater challenges in every activity uh, with other organizations. In contracting, for example, I'll just zoom in a bit. In contracting, for example, or securing delivery or obtaining associated technical and service support, innovation can be even harder in vertically integrated companies, especially in those that face difficult trade-offs. If the innovation erodes the value, if the innovation erodes the value of in-house assets, or if current products or processes must be maintained while new ones are developed. So basically, cluster is easier if the businesses cluster. It's easier to innovate. And then here, I think, let's see, I'll just double check. Okay, almost done. So this one is fairly straightforward. So I'll just go over it a bit quicker so we can go to the next one. So clusters and new business formation. It is not surprising then that many new companies grow up within an existing cluster rather than at isolated locations. So new suppliers, for example, proliferate within a cluster because a concentrated customer base lowers their risk and makes it easier for them to spot market opportunities. Moreover, because developed clusters comprise related industries that normally draw on common or very similar inputs, suppliers enjoy extended opportunities. So I'll just skip here. Birth, evolution, and decline. So a cluster's roots can often be traced to historical circumstances. So in Massachusetts, for example, several clusters had their beginnings in research done at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or Harvard. The Dutch transportation cluster owes much to Holland's central location within Europe, an extensive network of waterways, the efficiency of the port of Rotterdam, and the skills accumulated by the Dutch through Holland's long maritime history. So history is clusters are usually formed like historically based on the activities of that specific area. Another way clusters can also be formed is that they may arise from unusual or sophisticated local demand. So Israel, for example, Israel's cluster on irrigation equipment and other advanced agriculture technologies reflects that nation's strong desire for self-sufficiency in food, together with a scarcity of water and hot, arid growing conditions. So the environmental cluster in Finland similarly emerged as a result of pollution problems created by local process industries such as metals, forestry, and chemicals. So a cluster's birth, evolution, and decline is very much tied to what is going on in that specific area. And then here, another way clusters may arise is also through innovation. An example here is Medtronic played this role in helping to create the Minneapolis Medical Device Cluster. Similarly, MCI, these are companies, and America Online have been hubs for growing new businesses in the telecommunications cluster in Washington, D.C. And the other one here is, the final one is a chance event. So sometimes a chance event creates some advantageous factor that in turn fosters cluster development. So although chance rarely provides the sole explanation for a cluster success in a location, the telemarketing cluster in Omaha, Nebraska, owes much to the decision by the U.S. Air Force to locate the Strategic Air Command Center there. So charged with a key role in the country's nuclear deterrence strategy, the SAC, or the Strategic Air Command, was the site for the first installation of fiber optic telecommunication cables in the United States. The local Bell operating company, now the U.S. West, developed unusual capabilities through its dealings with such a demanding customer. So the SAC, the Strategic Air Command Group, SAC. So sometimes it can just happen by chance. If a government locates there, so there's a lot of opportunities in. Sorry, my voice. There's a lot of opportunities in large government agencies working together with the private sector or the business sector to create new clusters. Once a cluster begins to form, a self-reinforcing cycle So this is the opposite of a vicious cycle. Like it's a positive spin uh, occurs. So especially when local institutions are supportive and local competition is vigorous. As the cluster expands, so does its influence with government and and with public and private institutions. So I think we can all experience different clusters in our different local communities. For example, in this area in Cebu, I'll just show an example. So this is the Fuentes menu. So just to give another example that's more local, and I think you can see this in your own cities as well. So in Cebu, my example would be a sort of medical cluster. So you have here Chonghua Hospital, just like let's see how many kilometers away. Just 300 meters away from Fuente Circle, you have Vicente Soto, about maybe 250 kilometers away. And just within this circle, you can find, let's see, there should be another one. I can't find it. Here. Sorry, the Visayas Med Hospital, Cebu Veles Hospital. So a lot of medical related buildings form this like medical cluster. So we have again Visayas Med, Cebu Veles. I think you can count some of the high schools as well, but I'll just focus on medical base. So we have Chonghua and then Vicente Soto. And I think there's more if we zoom out, but this area where I've drawn the lines kind of looks like a 1 kilometer radius around Fuente, where you have a lot of medical related industries. So how these clusters have come about could be, I'm not super familiar, I'm not an expert on Cebuano history, but maybe because Fuente has been here for a long time, the hospitals came first and they created this ring of medical related schools. So it further reinforced the medical cluster as I so call it in this area. So maybe something similar is happening in your areas as well. Okay, moving on. So let's see. So that's basically the clusters here. Next point here, implications for companies. So in the new economics of competition, what matters most is not inputs and scale, but productivity. So and that is true for all industries. The term high tech, normally used to refer to fields such as information technology and biotechnology, has distorted has distorted thinking about competition, creating a misconception that only a handful of businesses compete in sophisticated ways. In fact, there is no such thing as low-tech industries anymore. There are only low-tech companies, that is, companies that fail to use world-class technology and practices to enhance productivity and innovation. Innovation, I think we see a lot of these in Cebu in particular. A vibrant cluster can help any company in any industry compete in the most sophisticated ways, using the most advanced, relevant skills and technologies. Thus, executives must extend their thinking beyond what goes inside their own organizations and within their own industries. So this I think applies to universities as well. That's why we're training the training of master's programs and doctorates within a university. You can call that a vertical growth, but also universities are now encouraged by CHED to hire people with master's degrees, PhDs, and like phasing out their faculty that don't have those higher education, what's the word, qualifications. Okay, so moving on, let's see. Extensive vertical integration may once have been appropriate, but companies today must forge close linkages with local buyers, suppliers, and other institutions. So specifically, understanding clusters adds the following four issues to the strategic agenda. So what are these issues? We have location selection or choosing locations. Next is engaging locally. oops, and then upgrading the cluster, and then finally working collectively. So these sort of interventions can be done within the organization, but I think there's also some room for both the public and private sector to innovate each other, like from the outside. So globalization and the for choosing locations, globalization and the ease of transportation and communication have led many companies to move or all of their move some or all of their operations to locations with low wages, taxes, and utility. That's why we discussed about ease of business a few weeks ago with like tax holidays, the economic zones to make businesses to incentivize business to locate to a specific area. So what we know about clusters suggests first that some of those cost advantages may well turn out to be illusory or like not real. Locations with those advantages often lack efficient infrastructure, sophisticated suppliers, and other cluster benefits that can more than offset any savings from lower input costs. So the tax holidays and tax breaks is only one factor of like creating or enticing industries or businesses to your location. So let's see. More important to ongoing competitiveness is the role of location in innovation. So yes, companies have to spread activities globally to source inputs and gain access to markets. Failure to do so will lead to a competitive disadvantage. And for stable labor-intensive activities such as assembly and software translation, low factor costs are often decisive in driving locational choices. For a company's home base for each product line, however, clusters are critical. So home-based activities, which include strategy development, core products, and process R&D, a critical mass of the most sophisticated production and service provision, create and renew the company's product, processes, and services. So basically, strategy development, R&D within a specific location impacts the innovation of these companies. Therefore, locational decisions must be based both on total system cost and innovation potential, not on input costs alone. So cluster thinking suggests that every product line needs a home base, and the most vibrant cluster will offer the best location. So the example here is within the United States, Hewlett Packard has chosen cluster locations for the home bases of its major product lines. California, where almost all the world's leading personal computer and workstation businesses are located. I'll just highlight that, California. Next one is Massachusetts, which has an extraordinary concentration of world-renowned research hospitals and leading medical instrument companies. It's home to medical instruments. So as global competition nullifies traditional comparative advantages and exposes companies to the best rivals from around the world, a growing number of multinationals are shifting their home bases to more vibrant clusters, often using acquisitions as a means of establishing themselves as insiders in a new location. Nestle, for example, after acquiring Rowntree Macintosh, relocated to confectionery business relocated its confectionery business to York, England, where Rowntree was originally based, because of a vibrant food cluster that thrives there. So basically, clusters encourage innovation. Then the next point here, I'll just skip. Engaging locally. The social glue that binds clusters together also facilitates access to important resources and information. Tapping into the competitively valuable assets within a cluster requires personal relationships, face-to-face contact, a sense of common interest, and insider status. So you can also feel this in in an office or a business. You tend to work with who you know, and I think more so here in the Philippines, Um, if we don't know someone or we don't know where they come from, we tend not to do business with them. So I think engaging locally is a very strong Filipino and Cebuano trait. The mere co-location of companies, suppliers, and institutes creates a potential for economic value, and it does not necessarily, but it does not necessarily ensure its realization. Just the potential is there. To maximize the benefits of a cluster involvement, companies must participate actively and establish a significant local presence. So they must have a substantial local investment, even if the parent company headquarters is elsewhere. And they must foster ongoing relationships with government bodies and local institutions, such as utilities, schools, and research groups. Companies have much to gain by engaging beyond their narrow confines as single entities, yet managers tend to be wary, at least initially. They fear that that a growing cluster will attract competition and then drive up costs or cause them to lose valued employees to rivals or spin-offs. As their understanding of a cluster concept grows, however, managers realize that many participants in the cluster do not compete directly, and that the offsetting benefits, such as greater supply of better trained people, can outweigh any increase in competition. So those are the benefits of engaging locally. Like it's becomes more familiar, and then the main point here is that because there's a cluster of one specific industry, the training for those workers in that industry becomes better because it becomes known as so and so in industry. So similar to what's going on in Fuente with the hospitals, it becomes like a medical cluster where the nurses and doctors are also trained within that area. Next, upgrading the cluster. Whew, this is taking longer than I thought. Because the health of the local business environment is important to the health of the company, upgrading the cluster should be part of the management's agenda. So companies upgrade their clusters in a variety of ways. So we have a few examples here. Genzim, I'll just highlight the company. We'll just do a quick look at what the company is about before we move on. Genzim. I have a specific tab. Where is that? Okay. So Genzim is an American biotechnology company based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Since its acquisition in 2011, Genzim has been a fully owned subsidiary of Sanofi. In 2010, Genzim was the world's third largest biotechnology company, employing more than 11,000 people around the world. So going back to our reference here, Massachusetts is home to a vibrant biotechnology cluster, which draws on the region's strong universities, medical centers, and venture capital firms. Once Genzim reached the stage in its development when it needed manufacturing a facility, CEO of the company Genzim, Henry Termere, initially considered the pharmaceuticals cluster in New Jersey and Philadelphia area because it had what Massachusetts lacked, an established expertise in drug manufacturing. Upon further reflection, however, Termere decided to influence the process of creating a manufacturing capability in Genzim's home base, reasoning that if his plans were successful, the company could become more competitive. Thus, Genzim deliberately chose to work with contractors committed to the Boston area, bypassing the many specialized engineering firms located near Philadelphia. Then, in addition, it undertook a number of initiatives with the help of the city and the state government to improve the labor force, such as offering scholarships, internships to the local youth. And then more broadly, Genzim has worked to build critical mass for its cluster. Termere believes that Genzim's success is uh, linked to the clusters, and that all members will benefit from a strong base of supporting functions and institutions. So this is one thing that I think we're starting to see in Cebu, medicine, as I mentioned earlier, and then I think in the area of fine arts and advertising as well. We have a lot of uh, I've had a few friends who work in local offices here. Their job is illustrating covers for books, sometimes even storybooks for children. But their bosses or the company owners are a cooperation between a Filipino local and a foreigner based in like in the U.S. or sometimes even Canada. And then hopefully those firms continue to be successful, and then they'll get to the level of Gen Z where they actually uh, support scholarships and work together with the government. I think the medical cluster here in Cebu doesn't have a lot of ties with local institutions except for the local schools. Not so much with the government, I think, because I don't hear any cooperation between Chonghua, for example, and the Cebu City government or the Cebu City mayor. I don't think there's a lot of collaborations there. But that's just like my experience. And then finally, working collectively. So the way clusters operate suggests a new agenda of collective action in the private sector. So investing in public schools is normally seen as a function of government, yet cluster thinking clearly demonstrates how companies benefit from local assets and institutions. So in the past, collective action in the private sector has focused on seeking government subsidies and special favors that often distort competition. But executives' long-term interests would be better served by working to promote a higher plane of competition. They can begin by rethinking the role of trade associations, which often do little more than lobby for government, compile some statistics, and host social functions. The associations are missing an important opportunity. So, what is that opportunity? Trade associations can provide a forum for exchange of ideas and a focal point for collective action in overcoming obstacles to productivity and growth. So associations can then take the lead in such activities as establishing uh, university-based testing facilities, and training or research programs, uh, collecting cluster-related information, offering forums on common managerial problems, investing solutions to environmental issues, and organizing trade fairs and delegations, and managing and purchasing consortia. I think this is happening although a bit slower with now, for example, the United Architects of the Philippines. We have a lot of seminars, workshops aimed at informing and training our local practitioners. And I think slowly our practitioners are becoming more competent than they were 10 years ago. But because the sort of environment in the Philippines in general is like not very friendly to new architects. These newly trained architects tend to kind of go out. But at least in the University of San Carlos, I see a lot of our PhDs, teachers with PhDs and masters still practicing locally. So I think eventually we'll feel the impact of this maybe 5 years down the line or 10 years down the line, where we have better project management for buildings, better design for buildings, etc. Okay, it's already 5:30. I'm still on the first report. Let's see. Clusters offer a constructive way to change the nature of dialogue between public and private schools. And let's see here. I'm not sure industrial. Not really talk about industrial policy, new public-private responsibilities. Okay, let's just go here to the last part. So there's a lot of public-private partnerships in the Philippines. So I think this will be a useful topic to just like read out. So new public-private responsibilities. So economic geography in an area of global competition then poses a paradox. So in a global economy which boasts rapid transportation, high-speed communication, and accessible markets, one would expect location to diminish in importance. Location meaning as a factor for business. But the opposite is true. So at the end of this, the enduring competitive advantages in global economy are often heavily local, arising from concentrations of highly specialized skills and knowledge, institutions, rivals, related businesses, and sophisticated customers. So geographic, cultural, and institutional proximity leads to special access, closer relationships, better information, powerful incentives, and other advantages in productivity and innovation that are difficult to tap from a distance. The more the world economy becomes complex, knowledge based, and dynamic, the more this is true. So we should encourage our leaders of business, government, and institutions um, to realize that they have a role to play in the new economics of competition. So clusters reveal that mutual dependence and collective responsibility of uh, all of these entities for creating conditions for productive competition. This task will require fresh thinking on the part of leaders and willingness to abandon the traditional categories that drive thinking about who does what in our economy. So again, linking this to what we discussed with earlier, companies are very risk averse and tend to hold on, or businesses tend to hold on to what they know. Um, Oftentimes because they don't want to risk change. But as urban planners and urban designers, it's our sort of duty to sort of raise awareness. And I think it's already happening, but we can make it happen in a more efficient way. So with our discussion here on clusters. So unfortunately, it's already 5:30, but hopefully this day creates the introduction to clusters. We have a lot more topics to discuss, like cluster theory, and supposed to be also discuss spatial structures, but this is related again to the impact of location and economic development. And then next week, we'll go through a lot. I think I'll just summarize this even faster. We have neighborhood economic development, trade and comparative advantage, economic base multipliers. And then these are a bit scary for me: input output analysis, shift share analysis, and supply side growth theory. So they have, I'll slowly put these readings online, but you can start with the readings that are already there. So in our Google Drive, let's just let's see, MUP 204. So we have the week. Let's just sort by name. There we go. Week 4 to week 5. So that's Motoyama, the one, no, Porter. Porter, this is the one I was reading, 1998. Then we have Motoyama, which talks about cluster theory. Then we have 2 case studies on clusters. That's here, 10A and 10B, cluster theory. And then we have Fisher. Oh, Fisher's over here. Okay, I missed up. This is supposed to be part of week 4, 2011 Fisher, week 04. So you start with Porter, Motoyama, and then Fisher. And then you go to clusters, case studies 1 and 2. And then I think you can leave it there because that's already a lot of reading. And then I'll try to summarize these other topics for next week. Hopefully I'll get I think I can get a PowerPoint for these. And then our May 20 meeting will have like a discussion probably for the 3 hours, and then I'll just maybe make my exam a bring home exam, so you can submit it maybe the Monday or Wednesday after the May 20 meeting. So it will really be difficult for me to check 2 reports. The MUD already has a report to make, so I don't think I can make another report assignment for MUP. So we'll just have like a simple quiz lang. And I think for me, it's really more about getting familiar with these types of thinkings, and then you can sort of apply that to your thesis and like your other classes. So that's it for me. I'll share this video as soon as it finishes processing, and then I will see you next week. Okay, see you guys.
Thank you,
Thank you, Sir
sir.
Roy.
All right.
Okay.